So why did I do this video? One is I wanted to set the record straight. Plus it's Comic-Con that bothers me. You see, every year at the comic convention down in San Diego, Francis is there or Keanu's there, and somebody will mention Constantine and they'll give him a little bit of meat, and get the fans something to think about, and suddenly they go crazy, and the next day everybody's going, Constantine 2 is on. And then my phone starts buzzing, and I get messages and I get calls. Is Constantine actually happening? And you're on, right? No, I never have to answer the second question because the first question I always answer with, it's just a bunch of hype. Warner Brothers is just not going to make it. And it's not because the movie was bad. The movie's actually great. Francis Lawrence did an amazing job making this movie. It's more Blade Runner than Blade, which is the Wesley Snipes series, about killing vampires. And I think that's what people wanted. That's why they didn't review this movie well. They didn't know what it was. But over the years, what's happened is the film grew in popularity. People started discovering that, okay, it wasn't what we thought it was going to be, but it's really good. And everywhere I go, if I talk about Constantine, they go, God, it's one of my favorite movies. If you made a sequel now, I think it would do fantastic business. And I think they do too. So my son calls me, I think it was late last year, and he says, Dad, they're going to make Constantine 2. And I said, oh, here we go again. He says, J.J. Abrams is on producing. J.J. Abrams. Can't ignore that. Guy rebooted Star Wars, he rebooted Star Trek, he's done some amazingly big things in Hollywood. So I go searching for it and I find J.J. Abrams is going to produce Constantine 2. And now they got the whole gang back that made the first film. They've got the actor, they've got the director, they got the producer, and they've got the writer, Akiva Goldsman. Hi there, this is Frank Cappello, and I want to tell you the story of my involvement in the writing of the movie Constantine. Now, you know it by that title, but I started to refer to it as Constant Pain. And why is that? Because I wrote 50 some odd drafts, that's polishes, rewrites, touch-ups, over a span of 4 years with 3 different directors, 2 different stars, and they didn't let me go until just before the shooting started. Now that's unheard of in Hollywood. A writer never lasts that long. We're usually given one chance to do one rewrite or one polish. And if we don't excite all the powers that be that say, this is the movie we have to make, well, the first person that goes is the writer. And then they bring in someone else. And if that person guesses wrong, well, they're gone. And this churn of writers happens a lot in Hollywood for films that never get made. Well, Constantine had some of those problems, and it did get made. So how'd that happen? Well, not to pat myself on the back too much, but I think it's because they hired me. Now, I'm not saying I'm a better writer than all the other writers that came before me, but this was my first studio writing assignment in Hollywood since I came to Los Angeles. And I wanted it to be great. I wanted it to be the best it could be. So that means I was willing to take risk and break all the rules. And I thought, wow, when I turn this script in, it's going to be the greatest thing. And no, it was not. In fact, once they read my draft, my studio writing career was essentially over. But wait a minute. I was still on this movie 3 years and 9 months, and it got made. How'd that happen? Well, that's the story of this video. Now, the first question you might ask is, who the hell is Frank Cappello? I've never heard of that guy. Well, here's a little history of who I was at that time in my career. So I had a company in Florida that did special effects commercials, and we were most known for the AMC Midnight Movie Express trailers. Those spots brought a lot of attention to the company and to me as well, but I wanted to make movies, so I was shocked when one of my scripts actually landed me an agent in Hollywood. Well, I packed up the family and we moved to Los Angeles, and guess what? That screenplay sold. Now I could make my short film, The Ivory Tower. That short convinced a production company to hand me my first feature directing gig, American Yakuza. The lead would be a young Viggo Mortensen, who was fresh off working with the incomparable Al Pacino. Now, American Yakuza turned out better than even I expected, and that led to directing No Way Back. My star would be Russell Crowe, the award-winning actor in Romper Stomper, the Aussie film that led to his first American role in Sharon Stone's The Quick and the Dead. Well, now I had 2 films under my belt with 2 actors that were becoming actual movie stars, and one of my scripts was getting a lot of attention around town, The Rain in Spain.
As a writer, that script opened every door in Hollywood, and I was wined and dined by some of the biggest producers and biggest directors. In fact, I rewrote that script for Ron Howard. So I'm pretty sure The Rain in Spain was the reason Warner Brothers put me on the short list to rewrite Constantine. But to get the job, I'd have to audition.
And let me tell you, auditioning as a writer is a lot different than auditioning as an actor. You know, you're not all sitting in a hallway with your screenplays like this, don't look at mine. No, you get the screenplay, you get the source material, the graphic novels in this case, and then you read them and you come in and you say how you're going to make this script a great audience-pleasing movie. But I didn't want to audition, and the reason why is because the script they sent me was not a script. It was a cut and paste, a conglomeration of all the writers before me, cut and paste by the producers, and whatever order they wanted, whatever scenes that they wanted, it was like a Frankenstein creation. And I can't fault the writers for any of what I read. This was all of their scripts jumbled together in a blender. I didn't really want to talk about it because I'd probably said something that would have lost me the opportunity to do the job. So I decided to do the opening scene to introduce John Constantine to the world, right? I was thinking, what am I going to do? I said, The Exorcist, because that's the world he's in, right? So I thought, The Exorcist, it's familiar. Everybody's seen that movie. They're going to think it's going to go away. They think it's going to go. So I have this little girl. She's possessed by a demon. I got a priest outside, and I got an exorcist showing up. But this isn't your father's exorcist. No, 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 no. This is John Bastard Constantine. And he will do anything to get the evil out of a room, even if he has to harm this little girl, even if he has to put her in the hospital, because he knows if he doesn't pull that thing out of her, that thing is going to rip her body apart and she'll be dead anyway. So John comes in like a bull in a china shop, jumps on that girl, puts his whole adult weight on her, could crush this little girl. Her mother is screaming because he's punching her chest. He's trying to stop her breath. In other words, he's really, really, really treating this child badly. And finally, the mirror comes in. And the mirror actually came from an idea. I was playing soccer at the time, and I was out all day in the sunlight, and I got sunburned, and my face hit the ground, and I had all these scratches on it and everything. And I'm looking in the mirror when I got home, and I was looking and I was saying, Jesus, I look like one of the demons I might be writing about, right? So I'm thinking demons in a mirror and everything. And that got me thinking about vanity, that maybe these vain pricks, as I call them, were so enamored with their own reflection that that's how you could capture them. So they bring in the mirror, they put it over there, the demon comes out of her, sees its own reflection, he captures it in the mirror, and they throw it out. And before it can get out of that mirror, it hits the ground, smashes, and the little girl is saved. So that's what my agent sent to them. And guess what? I got hired. So I never had to do the audition, but now I had to go in and actually listen to what they wanted me to do. And here's what they said. We like your character work in Rain in Spain. We think you're a great character writer. So we want you to put that kind of character in this and just do a better ending. And, you know, just clean some things up. And I'm thinking, clean some things up? What about the middle? The middle, I can't talk. I just got this job. I don't want to lose this job right now. So I go home. And the first thing I do is I'm holding up the source material, right? The graphic novels. And I'm holding up the screenplay and the other thing. And I'm saying, this is a dark, brooding, cool-ass film with a character that I love to write for, with a lot of crazy images that audiences will love. And over here, I got Indiana Jones in Chinatown doing a bunch of Schwarzenegger one-liners. They're not the same ballpark. They're not even in the same world. This has nothing to do with the source material. I can't rewrite this. I got to start over. That was a big decision, and I didn't tell my agent I was doing this. I just thought maybe I can make this thing great. But I had to start somewhere, right? Now I started with John. He had a little problem in me with all these comics. How come this guy can get through it? He's just a normal human, right? He's a little smart ass. He's a magician, rock star magician, they would call him. And he basically can go to hell, he can go to demons, and he never gets killed. How does he keep surviving? Can't we give him just one little thing that gives him something special for the reasons that he can do what he did? And I was thinking about this, that maybe John Constantine was like the kid in Sixth Sense. Maybe he saw things that when he was a young kid and they were worried about this, and so they had him go to doctors and psychiatrists and therapists and all this. Maybe they even tried to exorcise this kid, some priest, you know. And he would get to that point where he didn't even want to be part of this world. But then I'm thinking, I can't do that because that's not in the canon, the history of this character. And he's been in a lot of graphic novels. I'll get killed. The fans will kill me. So I couldn't do that. But I could use that maybe for the person that he's trying to save. Because, Bond never changes in movies, and Constantine's not going to change. So he's going to have to really do something to save somebody. And who could that be? And I thought, well, it should be a woman. And there's a reason, because he's being a man to save a woman. And I thought there was a connection. And then the audience, whether they know it or not, actually always wants these two characters in a movie to get together. But I didn't want her to be weak, and she'd be weak if she had all of these problems as a child and she was seeing things and all, and that wouldn't work. I wanted her to be a strong woman. I wanted her to be a police officer. So I gave her a sister. And so if I gave her a sister, I could give all those things to the sister. And then I'd make them twins. And by having them twins, they both have a gift. You see, the way we would see Angela from the very beginning of the film is she's pinned down on the tracks, railroad tracks, inside of a dark subway. She's got a gun in her hand, there's her badge, she's sweating. Obviously, she's been running, and this has come to this moment. And about 200 feet down is someone else pinned. We can't see them, but we can hear them. And they're trying to taunt her out, because whoever rises is going to get shot by the other one. And then suddenly the tunnel starts to glow brighter as a train starts to come around the tracks, right? And now the beam of light pierces through that long tunnel, and every single piece of dust turns into a floating piece of diamond. And now any movement they make, the other one's got a clear shot. So they're waiting it out. Who's going to get up first? The train is coming, and they both rise up at the same time, and they both start firing, and that train comes, and Angela jumps off the track, and boom, the train goes by, dust clears, and her bullets found the mark, and she killed the guy. But none of his bullets ever hit her. A miracle. It's like the scene in Pulp Fiction where Samuel Jackson and John Travolta have come into a room, these college kids, right, to collect money, and a guy comes running out of the bedroom, firing his gun, right, and they're within like 7 feet away, and every single one of the bullets hit the back wall. And this is the moment where Samuel Jackson decides, I'm no longer going to be a hitman. I've seen God or something has told me to change my path. That's what Angela feels. What is happening to her? Why does she always get out of these scrapes, right? She goes to bed and she has a dream. She's running down a hallway, goes up on top of a roof. We see the whole city, and then she takes her foot off and she commits suicide. And when her body hits, Angela wakes from the dream, like we always see in movies. Except when she goes to the place, it's real. And the body there is her twin sister. And I loved having twins because you can do so much between the two of them. Like when they were growing up, who were they? At one time I had an image of two little girls on a swing set, swinging. But I love the fact that Angela, the one that's more adult in this and the other one's more out there, flaky, she never helped her sister. And her sister went to mental hospital after mental hospital. And she would say to Angela, which is a line in the movie, which is, tell them you can see this. Tell them that you can see this. And Angela never spoke up because she never let herself really go there. So she feels guilty. And especially since her sister just committed suicide, and she would never do that. And John is going through his own demons when he finds out he's got cancer from smoking, and that's right out of Dangerous Habits, one of the graphic novels. They run into each other like 3 times, and John's only got like 8 or 9 months, maybe a year to live. And eventually, Angela comes to talk to the one person that might actually listen to her about her sister. And that's the scene where he doesn't give a damn about anybody. He's feeling sorry for himself. But then things are flying by the windows and they're not coming for him. So he goes out and he chases her down. And then all the lights go down and then everything happens. And at the end of it, he says, they were not after me, they were after you. And so he wants to see if Isabel really went to hell. Now, in the original comics, they would have put a pentagram down and some candles, he would have done some incantations, and I'm just sick of that. I like to do things that are brand new. So I started inventing this thing where water is the conduit between the different planes of existence, like heaven and heaven and earth and hell and earth. And so by doing that, it opened up a lot of things audiences have never seen. So when he's going to hell and he puts his feet in a bucket of water and is holding Isabel's possession, which is a cat, and he tells her to leave the room, it's just such a crazy image to see him sitting in this chair. As a matter of fact, I have that picture on my wall. And then I could use this again, because if water is the conduit, then he has to put Angela submerged in the bathtub because she wants to see what her sister saw. And that whole scene I love, because she's standing there handing him her wallet, handing her her phone, handing her her watch and all, and then she says, I have to be fully submerged. And he goes, yes. And he goes, do I need to take off my clothes or can I leave them on? And there's this long pause. John, and he finally goes, you can leave them on. And that moment is the one time in the movie, well, there's two times in the movie, where John is actually a man. You know, he has those feelings. He's always fighting demons. He's always dark. But in that moment, well, she could take her off her clothes, and he doesn't do it. So anyway, I'm writing on this script. I get it done. And I think it's in pretty good shape, but I'm really, really worried because this is brand new. And I'm hoping they can just let go of everything in the past and just accept something brand new. But that's tough. It's tough. But I'm excited. So my agent sends it in, and they hated it. They were so pissed off because I took all these writers' work and all the hours they spent with those writers getting what they wanted, and I threw it away. And I knew it was a waste of their time, and they felt that, and they felt that from me. And they even said to my agent, how could this guy do this? This isn't why we hired him. And anyway, my career for studio writing was pretty much over at that point. So these 4 weeks go by, maybe 5 weeks, and a miracle happened. Now, every executive in a studio has stacks of scripts in their office. They look like little skyscrapers. The taller they are is how many drafts have been written or how many writers. And every cover page, especially the one at the top, has every other writer that has worked on it, all the draft dates, all this. It's pretty full, the cover. But I did something a little arrogant, a little ballsy, and you got to take a risk in life, right? And I didn't put anybody else's name on it. I did want someone to notice that. And the executives that noted this hated me for doing that. But Lorenzo de Bonaventura, who was the president of Warner Brothers, was in his office, and on his stack, he sees this script with all white on it, and it says, Constantine by Frank Cappello, first draft. And he takes it home, and he reads this script, and he comes back in, and he tells all these executives that were pissed off at me, now this could be a movie, and this is the writer to write it. And that's how I became the writer on Constantine and spent 4 years of my life with 3 different directors, 2 different stars, writing Constantine. And what happens next is actually even stranger. Okay, so now I'm on the lot, right? I'm an official Hollywood studio writer, and it was pretty cool. Because if you don't come from LA and you dream about being in the movie business in Hollywood, being on a studio lot, making films on a studio lot, even writing on a studio lot is kind of the dream. I used to sneak into Disney, and I used to sneak into Paramount and Warner Brothers, and invariably I'd probably have to get questioned and then have to leave. But now I was allowed to be there. Warner Brothers was my lot. And so I kept waiting for someone to ask me when I would walk around the lot, ask me some question to see if I was supposed to be there, so I could say, yes, I'm an actual studio writer working on a movie called Constantine. I'm supposed to be here. But no one asked me. So I was working primarily at that time with Lauren Donner, the producer of all the X-Men movies. She went even back to Pretty in Pink, I believe, and St. Elmo's Fire in those days, and she did Lady Hawk, the Matthew Broderick film. And that's how she met Dick Donner, because she hired him on as her director. And they eventually got married, and I got to go to their house a lot. And Dick was just such a fun guy, always giving advice. And the two of them together, it was really an honor to work with them. And at this point, everybody's on board with the script, even the people that were pissed off at me. Now they like the script, they like the story. And so we're going ahead. And the first director they considered was a guy named Paul Hunter. And Paul Hunter was a pretty big music video director. He had worked with all the top music stars and a lot of sports sports figures, and he had done a lot of commercials, even one he got an Emmy on. But he didn't stick around too long because I think he had his own project called Bulletproof Monk that he was already starting to shoot. So it didn't work out with Paul. But it got the studio thinking now we're going for a director. This movie's going to get made. But just before that happens, I meet a guy named Akiva Goldsman. So I meet Akiva one day, and Akiva comes up, and the first thing he says to me, he says, "I'm not going to fire you." And I'm looking around like, well, why would you fire me? And he goes, "I like your writing. You write differently than I do. You don't put a button on the end of every scene like I do. You're creative. You've got a lot of good ideas. So I'm going to keep you on. I'm not going to fire you." And I didn't know whether to thank him or look around to see if I was being punked because I didn't understand the politics yet of Hollywood. And what I realized was he was kind of the in-house producer-writer for the entire Warner Brothers studio. His name is on so many movies, either as a producer or as a co-writer or even the main screenplay writer. Now, I have to talk a little bit about Akiva because Akiva is a pretty interesting man, and I got to know him professionally for about 3 years, because he came on about a year in. And that goes right into his superpower, which I really want to talk about. You see, Akiva was raised in a mental hospital, at least part of his childhood. That's what he told me. He wasn't crazy. His parents were psychologists, and they worked in the hospital to help the patients. So they had a place that they lived right there, and Akiva actually lived in a mental hospital. So he learned a lot about psychology, and he uses that. And his superpower was 4 simple words. Does that make sense? And if he ever sees this, he's going to laugh because he knows he uses that. And what it comes down to, it's almost like a psychological way to get people to approve what you're talking about. Because when he would say it, if he said something like, well, Frank thinks that there should be a church in hell and a Bible in hell because it's kind of the reverse and it gives a little weight to the movie. Does that make sense? You would see this. Like 5 people in the room doing this. And it's like those little bobblehead dolls you put in the back of a car that every time they hit the bump, they do this. That's what it was. It was magic. And I would sit there. Sometimes I wanted him to say something really crazy because I really wanted to see if they would just nod. At that point, the studio's now looking for bigger and bigger director names. And who they found was Tarsem. And Tarsem did The Cell. And if you've never seen The Cell, it's pretty amazing and very scary movie. And visually, it's stunning. And I thought he would be the perfect guy to work on this film. And right when he joined, Nicolas Cage joins on. And this was when Nicolas Cage was a $10 million star. And I got to go to his house. It was like a castle. The ceiling height was like 35, 40 feet. But what he had in the hallway was the original Robbie the Robot from Lost in Space. I mean, right from the series. I thought that was the most impressive thing. I didn't care about all the Ferraris parked in the front yard. So Nick was pretty cool, but he kind of wanted this character to have a hot car and to have a gun. And these are things that Constantine had nothing to do with. Constantine didn't drive. He didn't use weapons. He didn't need to. The things he was fighting, you can't shoot him with a bullet. And Tarsem had a lot of ideas he wanted to put in, and some of those were pretty crazy. I liked working with Tarsem. I thought he was a pretty funny guy. He had a lot of charisma. And because he was a Muslim, he was always being red flagged when he came through to come to the United States on a plane. He always thought they were going to probably arrest him. He was really fun to work with, and he let me into his art room. And he had this guy that was his art director. He papered all the walls with all these photographs, like inspiration for Tarsem to say, I like this, I could combine it with that. And it's really a godsend to have somebody like that on a movie that can help you find the vision in your mind. So sets are starting to be built or designed, artwork is being done, props are being designed, all this stuff is just accelerating, right? The studio is starting to get the buzz that this movie's going to happen. And suddenly, there was a real problem with my father. Now, I bring this up because it has a lot to do with Constantine. So I fly back to Florida. My dad is having open heart bypass surgery. He didn't have a heart attack, but 5 of his arteries are almost completely blocked. So they're having to take the veins out of the leg to replace those arteries. And I'm sitting in the waiting room with my mom and my sister, right? And we've been there a long time. And the doctor comes out and he ain't smiling, you know. We haven't seen him in a while. And he goes, we have a problem. When we got all the stitches done, all the arteries replaced, we have to take the pump off. But the heart wouldn't start, not on its own. And we shocked it, and we shocked it. And we're sitting there going, did he die? What happened? And he says, 5 minutes later, his heart just starts beating. It just starts. And we're back there right now trying to keep it going. It's pretty touch and go, but we wanted to come out here and tell you what was going on. So he goes back in, and my sister and I are sitting there going, wait a minute, Dad died? For like 5 minutes? Dead? But that's not the strangest part. That happened 3 months later. So my mom and dad come visit us in LA. My mom warns us, your dad isn't the same. He's not smiling much anymore, doesn't laugh, certainly doesn't whistle. He's changed. A few nights later, I have a private conversation with my dad. I say, how you feeling? He says, oh, I'm feeling good and I'm doing what the doctor says. And I go, no, how are you feeling? My dad's a pretty private guy, and he finally says, well, I'm having trouble sleeping. I'm having these horrendous nightmares. And I'm going, what do you mean, nightmares? So my dad starts doing this with his fingers, you know. It's like he's trying to describe to me or show me what it is he's seeing in these nightmares. And he's using words like grotesque and horrendous and even obscene. And I said, Dad, why don't you let me get you somebody you can talk to about this, like a therapist or something while you're here? And he goes, no, I'm not going to do that bullshit. And he wouldn't talk about it anymore. And later I'm talking to my mom, and my mom says, well, you do know your father has a terrible fear of death. And I said, I didn't know that. And she goes, yeah. See, he was raised Catholic, right? But he was in the Korean War. And he never talks about that time because I think he might have taken some lives. And well, those two worlds collided, and it doesn't quite work. Over here, you've got the Christian faith of thou shalt not kill. And over here, you fight for your country or democracy. And it didn't quite work. And I used to say to him, listen, if you're going to die, you're going to die. But while you're living, why don't you live? And he would laugh about it, and he'd say, well, when I die, at least I know exactly where I'm going. And he would look down. I said to my mom, you're shitting me. And she goes, no, that's your dad. Now, why does this all seem so familiar? Because it's in the movie Constantine. John commits suicide. He's going to hell. And he's dead for like 5 or 7 minutes, and they revive him. And when he comes back, he can see the demons. He can see the world behind the world. And he knows exactly where he's going when he dies. Now, I'm not saying my dad went to hell, but I don't know where we go when we die. I do know one thing. I'm going to start writing. And I started writing this all down. And I run into Akiva's office, and all this commotion's going on. They're getting ready to make this movie. And I said, listen, I have something that solves the problem I've always had with Constantine and what sets him apart from all other people. And he goes, we don't need that. We've already got our schedule. We're starting to make the schedule. I don't want to confuse people. We're not going to do that. And I said, but it makes the movie better. It's great for the audience. And he goes, it doesn't matter, Frank. It's too late. Now, I don't want this to become a distraction. I don't want to hear any more about it. So I walk out of the room and I said, wait a minute. I'm on a movie that wouldn't exist if I hadn't broken all the rules and almost ruined my career. I can't stop now. So I went to Bob Brassel, one of the people that was pissed off when I wrote this, and he loved those pages, and he sent it up the food chain, so to speak, and it got put into the screenplay, and it got into the movie. Now, I never asked Akiva if he was pissed off at me for doing that, because I went over his head and I did what he didn't want me to do. But it did make the movie better. So that was how Constantine got his backstory, which means I did exactly what I said I wouldn't do at the beginning, and I changed the canon, the past of the character, and I gave him a backstory. And I also gave him a power where he can put his 2 tattoos together and and kind of rip through the fabric of the dimensions and draw out demons or even angels. Tarsim's starting to have problems because he wants things that have nothing to do with the story put into the script. He wants to shoot things like, get this one, Jesus Christ on a surfboard with his eyes gouged out with the 4 horses of apocalypse coming over the wave into Los Angeles. Everybody I know, Lauren was asking me, what does that mean? I said, I don't think it means anything. I think Tarsim just trying to make a striking image so he can get in the trailer. And she goes, we're never going to allow that in the trailer. That's blasphemy. And then another one he did was the ending of the movie when the devil comes to pull Constantine to hell, is that he wanted the devil to be played by like 20, 30 different people. And these would be famous people like Elvis and Ronald Reagan and all this and all. But I didn't like that idea because I said, this is a very dramatic moment in the film where the devil comes for him. It needs to be one person. If you keep jumping back and forth to different people and all, it's going to diffuse the actual thing that's happening. So Tarsim's starting to argue with the studio. And it became very tense. And one day, Akiva comes to me and he says, listen, you can take out everything that Tarsim made you put in here and go back to the script just before it because he's gone. So I guess Tarsim quit. And when he quit, Nicolas Cage quit because Nicolas Cage was only doing the film if Tarsim directed it. And he was pay for play. So I'm not sure how much they had to pay off Nicolas Cage, but it could have been as high as $10 million. So now this film is in the hole, 10 or 12 million. It has no director, has no actor. And this is when the screenplay went to Keanu Reeves. Keanu was over in Australia, actually doing Matrix 3, I think at the time. And they did 2 and 3 back to back. So he wanted to meet me because he loved the screenplay. So I got to go. I got to go to Australia and I got to be with Keanu like 3 nights in a row. And there was a marching order, though, that I was not allowed to be alone with him. And I think it was Bob Brassel that told me that because Erwin Stoff, Keanu's manager, was coming along with us. And they didn't want me as a director, even though I had directed 2 movie stars at this point in my past. So I wasn't allowed to even be alone with Keanu. So I felt really weird when I met him because I don't know what I'm supposed to say or what I can or can't say. But there was one moment Keanu went outside to get some air and all at night, and I went out with him. And I asked him about who do you want for a director? And he says, well, what I don't want is just a music video director. I don't want someone that's just visual. I want Coppola. I want that kind of guy, somebody that understands the character, somebody that wants to really pay attention to him, and the visuals will back that up. And I couldn't say anything. I couldn't say anything. So I get back from Australia, right? And I'm having a conversation with Dick Donner. And I'm telling him how it went with Keanu, and how it was great and everything, and how he was telling me what kind of director he wants. And he said, Frank, you need to get this film. You should be the director of this film. And I'm going, well, tell your wife that. And he goes, she's not going to help you. That's politics. That's a studio politics. You're going to have to grab this yourself. And I said, how do I do that? And he goes, write Keanu a letter and send it to him in Australia. And don't tell anyone. And I said, what would I put in a letter? He says, just sell yourself. Tell him what he told you. Just tell him that I am that guy that pays more attention to the character. And you know the character inside out. Tell him how you're Coppola. Your last name's Cappello. That's close. I'm sitting here and I'm going, but I can't go behind their back. And he goes, you can't go in front of their back. They're not going to hire you. Either you do this or you never get the shot. Listen, if he doesn't want you as the director, nobody will probably ever know about the letter, and you'll still be safe. But if he wants you as the director, you're the director. So who are you, wussy? You going to do it? You going to write that letter? Or you going to wonder, what if? And he's pretty persuasive, Dick Donner. And I said, okay, I'm going to write that letter. And now I had a scheduled meeting with all the Warner Brothers staff, with Akiva, with Lauren, Erwin Stoff, Keanu's manager, was there, to pitch myself as the director of Constantine. I actually got that day. So I'm pitching myself as the director, and I'm giving it all. You know, I'm a writer, but I'm also a director. I actually understand the character. I work well with actors. My crews loved me when I made these 2 films. And I got done, and I said, well, I'll put the icing on the cake here. I'll get these guys to believe me. And I stupidly, something I'll regret for the rest of my life, I took out that letter that I wrote to Keanu. I slid it out onto the desk and I said, I wrote this letter to Keanu to tell him that I should be the director on this. Silence. And I could feel the heat coming off of Erwin Stolf, the hatred right there. And then I used these words, but I didn't send it. Because I didn't want you guys to think I would go behind your back. And I wanted you to know that I would be a loyal team player. It didn't matter. I was done. So they got up, the meeting was over, Akiva stayed behind, and he goes, you know, you did a great job. You couldn't have done a better job pitching yourself. But that letter, and I go, I didn't send it. It doesn't matter. Erwin thought you would have sent it, and he doesn't want you. So I wouldn't have gotten the job. He says, you wouldn't have gotten it anyway. He's taken on a new client. His name is Francis Lawrence. I says, has he done anything I've heard? He says, well, he's a music video director. And I just went like this again. He says, I know, but the guy's really good. And the guy has a great sensibility for this project. And I said, okay. So a little bit later, the other shoe drops. Akiva comes to me and he says, listen, I got to let you go. I got to fire you. I said, was it something I said? He says, no, you know why. Francis Lawrence is now on the picture. We're building everything for him. And he's kind of a little scared that you've directed 2 films before, and he thinks that you'd be looking over his shoulder and always thinking of the way you would have shot it. You know what? I understood that. I said, but if Francis had ever taken a moment to call me when he got this job, I am the writer, it's been on it 4 years. If he'd ever gotten the chance, if he ever tried to even get to know me, he would have known that I wouldn't be that way. I honestly would do everything I could to support him to make the best movie because that makes me look good too. He says, yeah, but, he's not going to do it. And Keanu. I said, what about Keanu? Well, Keanu, he's worried about a first-time director. So he wants a seasoned writer, producer on the set. So I would be taking over the writing things for Francis. I said, Keanu said that? He says, yeah. He wants a seasoned writer to be able to work with this first-time director. I said, okay, I accept all this, and it's fine. My gig with Constantine was over. So now, fast forward to them starting to make Francis's version of this film. It's the second day of shooting. And when you walk on a stage where a giant set is there, everything in the middle is lit up overly bright, and everything around the perimeter is almost in blackness. So I'm standing in total shadow, and I'm watching them shoot. And they take a break. And I can see Keanu, he's wearing the black coat and everything. So Keanu turns in the light and he starts walking my way. But I know he can't see me because I'm in total darkness. But he keeps walking and walking, and now I'm wondering, does Keanu have night vision eyeballs or something? Because he's coming right through the darkness and he comes right up to my face and he stops and he says, Frank, why are you on this movie? No. Huh. Politics. That's Hollywood. Hollywood. Boo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-da-da-da. Da 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 da. What most people don't know is that I already wrote Constantine 2 back in 2011, and it had the full endorsement of Keanu. You see, 5 years after the first movie released, I had this dream. It was about spontaneous human combustion. Weird way to start a dream. But I sat down and I wrote 11 pages, and it was essentially Constantine being kidnapped, taken down to a demon's lair, and asked to authenticate the man that's sitting in a jail cell down at the end of the hallway. And that man is Jesus Christ. And the dialogue between the two is what got everybody's attention. So Akiva wanted to meet me 2 days before Christmas, about the same time as we are now. And Francis is there, shakes my hand, says hi. And Akiva does all the talking. He says, okay, you got our attention. What happens in this story? I says, well, We went to hell last time, we're going to go to heaven this time, and it's a hell of a lot harder to go to heaven if you're still alive. Well, that hooked him. And it also hooked Keanu. And Keanu and I had a great lunch in Santa Monica, and I basically told him a lot of the scenes that I thought it would be. He thought it was cool. And later, back at Warner Brothers, all the executives, all the producers, all stood around and watched Keanu actually act out a few of these scenes I told him about, and it was a real kick. So you would think with an A-list actor and the original writer and an idea everybody likes that we would make this deal pretty quickly, right? No. It took 7 months to make the deal for 1/6 of what I would have gotten paid in 2005 for the same sequel, which meant they were never going to make this movie. Now, I was off to write the screenplay, and the only marching order I had this time from Akiva was make it a hard R, based more on ideas and less on violence. Okay. So I start writing, and my last 4 weeks on it, I went to the Czech Republic in Prague, and I'm in a whole different place. I've got these tiny little narrow cobblestone roads. I got gargoyles all over the top of buildings. You got iron statues that look like Batman. And whatever that world was seeped into me. And I wrote something I would have never wrote if I stayed in Los Angeles. So I come back with this script, and I give it to my friend, and we usually destroy each other's screenplays. He's also a writer, and he's produced like 30 movies. But this time he says, you know what? This might be the best thing you've ever written. And he said, as a devout atheist, this script actually made me believe there might be a God. That's a pretty big endorsement. So I turned it into Warner's. I'm excited about it. And I got the anxiety waiting for that first response, right? I don't know if they're going to kill it, destroy it, love it, what. Usually it happens 2 or 3 days if you've got a big star like Keanu on. 2 or 3 days goes by, nothing. A week goes by, nothing. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, nothing. A month, nothing. 2 months, nothing. 2.5 months in, and not one of these producers, not the director, not the executives at Warner Brothers has called my agent or me. Nothing. So I leave a message on Keanu's phone, basically saying, what the hell's going on? I don't know what's going on. I haven't heard from anybody. He leaves a message back. This is crazy. He says, I loved it. It made the hairs at the back of my neck stand up. There's so many great moments in it. Okay. More months go by. It's now 2023. 11 years have gone by, and not one of those, and I have to use this word, and sensitive bastards has ever called the writer. Not a word. Not one respectful word. But the person that disappointed me most is Akiva, because he's a writer. He's faced the blank page. He knows the anxiety of turning something in. Hell, he was a year late delivering Beautiful Mind to Ron Howard. So he knows that anxiety, and he won the Academy Award, which I'm very proud of him, and I'm glad he did. But he, of all people, should have picked up the phone as soon as he read that screenplay and called me. I got a film coming out. It'll be premiering at Chinese Man's in February of 2024. It's called The Womb, and it's a pretty cool movie. And I hope I see you in the theater, and if I do see you, say hi. This is Frank, signing off.